first time speaking at a family event of ours. You, Yvonne, and I think also Frankfurt University of Applied Science, looking forward to a presentation on compliance and risk assessment of farmlands and prospective transport partners.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. It's my pleasure to be here at this conference. And I enjoyed already the presentation of the previous speaker, really very interesting. So my presentation is focusing on compliance and risk assessment of farmer lanes and their respective transport partners. And I will go with you together through the presentation and then also do a live demo of our tool. The tool is called Mitigate, and the background really was a regulatory one. We have been approached by pharma companies from Germany to help them support them fulfilling the European Union's Good Distribution Practice Guideline, which was already legislated in 2013. But it was still a challenge for them really to fulfill them, because they were lacking a little bit the insight into their own supply chain, especially when it comes to transportation. And the guideline was very specific. Of course, they said there have to be, of course, a quality system, and the planning of transport must be risk-based. So the focus, of course, of the presentation, our tool is really the transport compliance and risk. And having, let's say, or developing a tool that enables the pharma company to be compliant here. And of course, there are many challenges when it comes to pharma transport. I'm sure you know many of them. We have just had the example of vaccines with cold chain and temperature deviation, but there are, of course, others also very present today, like delays, for example, at ports in China, for example, but also theft, loss, accidents, counterfeit documentation problems, vibration damage, or other damages due to handling activities. As I said before, our tool is a tool that allows a digital lane risk assessment. And basically, it starts to help companies on the planning phase, but it also allows to later on monitor the quality when it comes to the shipments, and really also cross-check, let's say, the performance and monitor the performance of the lanes. The tool the software tool was developed with our advisory board, and you can see that there were 6 pharma companies present who were also defining the user requirement specification before we started. But we also had quite a lot of companies involved from the transportation business who also gave their input and supported us during the setting up of the tool. So talking about the software, how does it work? Basically, the starting point is really the legal requirements. We have developed a questionnaire based on 8 different roles, because we are covering the transport by air, transport by road, and also transport by sea. So depending which mode of transportation you're selecting, and often it's, of course, a mixed mode, you select the different transport partners, and then, of course, depending on the transport partners, you also need a different questionnaire. And behind the questionnaire, there is a mathematical risk model, immediately signaling when there is a deficiency or a non-compliance, for example. What is also possible is to have visibility of the certificates and capability, and this also allows a first cross-check and plausibility check with the answers given. In addition, it of course assures also that, let's say, an external party has verified already certain answers, because otherwise the certificate would not have been issued. Then, of course, it's also relevant to talk about the business regulation of the individual firm, so they can also decide to to have, for example, the EU GDP regulations being valid not only for Europe or transports from and to Europe, but also for the rest of the world, basically. And what is also very important is, of course, the product specification, because depending on the product, of course, there are also different requirements regarding the lane. And once you have then, so with Mitigate, you can compare different lanes with the different partners on it and assess the potential risk of these partners. But once you have then decided for one lane, you can also cross-check the quality of the lane by assigning quality data to these lanes and cross-checking, for example, from data logger information if the lane was really performing well, or if the risk score has to be adjusted. And as another risk aspect is, of course, the weather, because there might be always a moment during the transportation where your product is exposed to the external weather conditions. It could be the unloading, for example, from the truck, hand over to the airline handling agent. It can be the transport from the airline handling warehouse to the aircraft on the tarmac. So very often you have these moments where the shipment is, if it's not, let's say, in an active cool container, there are moments where the shipment is exposed to external temperature, and this, of course, can create a severe risk in both directions. If it's a super sunny day, it can heat up and be damaged. If we talk back signs, this can quickly happen. But it can also go the other way around. If it's too cold, if it's freezing, then of course also your product can be damaged quickly. Yeah, so how does the questionnaire look like? So basically, based on the different roles, of course, the questions vary by the role owner. There are up to more than 200 questions for some of the roles. So it's very thorough, of course, the check. And yeah, we are not also covering the EU GDP, but we also integrated other legal regulations, for example, Singaporean, Indian, Saudi Arabian, Chinese and Russian, and also the PICS, of course. And this is then how a profile looks like. Basically, you can see that there is here a very positive risk score. You can also see that this company has acquired a lot of certificate. So basically this profile looks really good. And once you have decided on a lane, you can also have a look at, of course, the profile, also especially look at the expiry date to cross-check if it's still valid. Because for many pharma companies, the EU GDP certification is a really important requirement. And then you can really start designing your lane, starting from the product, putting down, of course, the product requirements, for example, a special storage temperature range. And then you can design your lane with the different partners on the lane. And yeah, actually, depending on where your shipment is transported, if it's an international transport, then there can be really up to 6-7 parties involved. If you have a transit somewhere, it might be even longer. So this is the example of a lane from Leverkusen via Frankfurt to New York, for example. And of course, what is most important, of course, is always the weakest partner. If we have one critical partner here on the lane, this can, of course, be the partner where, let's say, a kappa is basically created, or a deviation, temperature deviation, for example. And you can, of course, also have a look at the individual partners and also always cross-check their compliance and their risk performance. And then, of course, depending also on the different location where your shipment is basically transiting, you can also access a weather profile with a minimum max temperature at a certain month, also focus regarding humidity and rain, for example, also wind or the direct sun radiation. Again, this gives you some more information on how you have to protect your shipment if it's not, if you're not using an active cool container. And then, of course, as I said before, you can monitor the quality on a lane by adding quality information to this lane, and you can, for example, cross-check if there was any temperature deviation done and at which partner this happened. And of course, once you observe that there are irregularities on the lane, then of course the risk score of the lane and the partner will be corrected. Yeah, what basically can you use Mitigate for? Basically, as a transport company, it really also shows you, or it gives you a possibility to really nicely present your services, because often not everybody is aware of these services and can see them. For example, this is an example of tarmac handling agent here in Frankfurt Airport. Fraport, they have a so-called Cool Farmer product. They have purchased cool dollies that allow the cool transport of passive packaged shipments from the warehouse to the aircraft, for example. And of course, you can book the service if you are aware of it. You can also see that there's a general farmer transport without the cool dollies, and then there are regular services for the normal cargo, which of course, if you would use them, they would have a higher risk. And then you can, of course, really make risk very visible on a lane. Here you have a lane from Frankfurt to Narita with different parties involved. You have a forwarder, of course, a transport by road, airline handling agent, tarmac handling agent, the transport by air, then the same basically on the other side at the destination side. And you can have here the farmer compliance risk score. You see that you have a problem here on the Japanese side, that probably your road feeder service is not really farmer compliant. And additionally, you also have the weather risk, but in this case, it's not really relevant because the shipment is transported in an environment until Narita. But here there is an unloading of the shipment into the truck, and of course, the unloading will take around 2 hours, and this will be then a non-temperature controlled area. And so here basically you have a high risk regarding temperature. And the same situation this was a situation in March, and this is a situation in July. So here the weather risk is even more increasing, and in this case it's also not an active cool container, but just a passive packaging. So you have a much higher risk. Here in this case, there is no time in a non-temperature controlled area, because it's possible to directly dock at the cool area and unload the shipment in the cool and the temperature controlled area. So you can of course also use Mitigate to investigate CAPAs and also compare different mode of transportation, for example. You can also use Mitigate for a lane verification. If you want to qualify a new lane with new partners, you can also do the documentation in Mitigate. And last but not least, you have really also the overview of all lanes with the performance of the different lanes, so easily spotting irregularities where you have to act on. And of course, using Mitigate, this is a chart that we have developed with our pharma customers. They expect that we can save, especially on the scrapping cost, depending, of course, on the value of the shipment. Here, the cost savings can be really high, but also on the investigation cost, because with Mitigate, you have already the transparency, knowing the partners, and can much clearer and much quicker investigate any irregularity. And of course, less CAPAs and irregularities also will generate lower insurance costs, probably a cost saving on packaging costs if you are better aware of temperature risk. And also you have consequential effects, for example, a higher customer satisfaction, and possibly also no penalties for delays. Mitigate also is a creation, really a co-creation with the pharma industry, resulting from a university research project. It's of course also compliant and using a scientific risk model, and it's also ISO 9001 certified. and also validated according to FDA guidelines, and also according to the EU Annex 11 regulation. Then maybe I just give you a quick demo of Mitigate. Let's see where my internet is. Here we go. So the first thing is really that you can easily access all the different transport partners. You can here already see the different certificates. And by clicking on them, if the internet is not too slow, you should easily be able to visualize them and check the validity date, for example. You can also have an overview on the infrastructure. And of course, here, the times are important. For example, the transport time from warehouse to the passenger aircraft, also to the freighter aircraft, and the same for unloading, for example. It's important to know these times in order to be able to protect your shipment. You can also see the location, getting a feeling on how long the distances are from the warehouse also to the different aircrafts. And you also have contact possibilities, and you can also limit the visibility if required. Then on the other hand, you can also have a look at the different lanes. Let's have a look where my demo is. Let's take the example we just mentioned also in the presentation. So this is really the long lane with all the partners, starting from the forwarder, the transport by road, the airline handling agent, the tarmac handling agent, the airline, and the same on the Narita side, the tarmac handling agent, airline handling agent, the forwarder, and then of course the road feeder service. And you see here, of course, that basically the weakest link in the chain can, of course, create problems. And you can also always have a look what the problem was. For example, have a look at the assessment questionnaire. And then, by looking at the detailed questions, you can, of course, also see that the company has the staff is not trained on security requirements. There's basically no designated person who's in charge of security. And in addition, you have also no pest control, for example. Yeah, so basically there are quite a number of deficiencies here. For example, here there's also no written cleaning program, and there's no pest control in place. Yeah, so this is really not pharma standard. So this Mitigate really allows you to really dig deep into the capabilities of the different supply chain partners, and really you can be sure that basically they understand and know pharma, of course. What you also can do is, of course, have a look at the different shipments on a lane. I mentioned already that you can assign the shipments to the lane and monitor the performance. And here, for example, you have the performance, and you can also see that, you have a temperature deviation at the very end. Again, documenting the fact that probably the trucking company doing the final delivery is not really working well, because apparently the cooling didn't work properly, because although it's not a big deviation, but it was still a deviation of 2 degrees, and that was, of course, not correct. So this way, basically, you can really also monitor the performance of lanes, and of course, this information is then generated back to the risk score of the lane, and of course also of the partner. Let's go back to the dashboard. Yeah, another example is a simpler lane. You can also monitor just transport by road. This was a however challenging lane in the middle of the summer. Was an ambient transport from France to Moscow, taking 6 days. And the company really wanted to check if the transport by road company is able to maintain the quality of the shipment. And yeah, this was really very well maintained, actually. They had different data loggers placed in the truck. And you can see here that, yeah, just apart from the unloading, which is unfortunately often the case, basically the whole transportation was perfectly maintained within the required temperature range. And yeah, if you look at the outside temperature, I think that was this logger. Yeah, you can see outside it was really very hot. I mean, the outside logger, of course, was partly exposed to the sun, but you can see the temperature went up to 53 degrees. And yeah, it was basically super hot during the whole transportation. So basically, it was really a good job done by the transport company that they were able to transport the shipment without a big without any problem. And you also can store, for example, the shipment report here. It takes a little bit probably to load because it's a number of pages. And yeah, you can see basically once again the whole lane, and it's an entire protocol with a truck used, the data loggers used, the placement of the data loggers. Yeah, also the outside data logger position, and yeah, similar result that basically the whole time during the transportation was perfectly maintained, except the unloading at the end. Okay, yeah, and that's basically my presentation for today. I switch back.
Thanks for the overview. So let's start on a very high level, where I have you now as an expert there. So why do you think that pharma is on the other end of the spectrum in terms of fulfillment or logistics? When I see, you know, the computer industry, Cisco, 90% of all the Cisco products, the Cisco person never touched. I'm thinking on pharma, we are on the other spectrum. Why do you think is pharma so behind using, you know, third-party logistic and other people, third parties, when we're talking about logistics? Why do you think? Because is it the complexity, is it GAM, or is it I do it all myself? So why is it, what is your view on this?
I think one big view is, of course, that the pharma industry is very secretive as far as concerned regarding any deviations or irregularities, because they have, of course, huge implications. So I think maybe the approach to openly share quality problems, irregularities is not really, I would say, something that the pharma industry is really so keen on. Yeah, so I think everybody keeps its information for themselves and tries to improve the own, of course, supply chain. But I think, yeah, I think it's, I mean, working together in these aspects, maybe also sharing some information would also give opportunities for improvement for the entire industry, for example.
I agree with you, but I think you made a good point. That's exactly the point, because everybody wants to have his own world and is not willing to open and share, and it makes it then for some common things much harder. So I was interested to hear your view.
I think the other aspect is probably also that, of course, pharma companies' core competency is not necessarily the logistics, but of course the production of their own products. So basically, they have outsourced a lot of the transport responsibility also to their forwarders, and also depend that the forwarders are basically assuring the compliance.
But that's where I see in comparison. I was a couple of weeks ago in the US, and I talked with one of the huge logistics companies, and for them regulation is a red flag. So that is where they really are getting nervous, you know. You can talk any products, any things, but as soon as you bring up the word, oh, there are a couple of regulations coming around, you know, you see that they're not feeling so comfortable any longer there. And again, as you know, pharma is highly regulated. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true. And but that's the beauty of basically our tool, yeah, because it gives you confidence that basically your partner have a good understanding of the pharma business. Because even, I mean, when we do the onboarding with different companies, we immediately get a feeling if the company is really familiar with the pharma standards, or if it's somebody just trying to enter this market but having no clue, to be honest.
And another question comes to me, because your tool is great, and I think it takes, you know, it's an assessment and from a monitoring perspective. But as you know, we have that, you know, this company also in Germany, SAP, where literally most pharma companies are customers, and they have logistic and supply chain systems. Is your system, can it be interact with them? Because I think certain data are there, vice versa. So how is your interaction there?
Yeah, our system is has basically a possibility to interface on all levels and can push or pull information. So it can also, yeah, for example, it would make sense. It would make a lot of sense to link it up to an SAP system, yeah, providing information on the different shipments, for example.
The system, the information is there already, and would be nice in synchronizing them in the right way, because that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also recently talked to a pharma company who said that also having the weather information, for example, at the moment of departure of the shipment would be interesting, because very often, I mean, to have, for example, cool trucks is, especially today with the high fuel prices, is very expensive. So if, for example, they have a forecast that the weather conditions are between, for example, 2 to 8 degrees, yeah, then maybe they could switch to a non-cool truck, because they can be sure that the weather would, let's say, remain in this temperature bracket, for example.
You're absolutely right. So, but one of the things I was hoping for, I think I speak for certain people in the street, if you could sensitize everybody up to open up more for certain things, I think there's a big cost saving, but I think that's a system change, I call it. It's not an adjustment. I think that is what pharma needs to learn from other industry. What we say, where we have best practices, and fulfillment logistic is, you know, where you are in other industries, I think, showing us the way.
Absolutely. And there are even other very regulated industries, like, for example, the banks, where there is this collaboration in place. Yeah, of course, the banks, they have gone through hard times with the bank crisis, of course, but they have found ways to collaborate and, for example, also share data, of course, anonymized and normalized of their customers, for example. Yeah, so when one customer is kind of deteriorating in the risk score, this information is also shared among other banks, for example.
I totally with you, and again, thanks for the presentation. I think great tool, great services, and looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.